Hi, we now have our second session of the day, Adriana Villela and Anna Medina, who are going to talk about onboarding doesn't have to suck, elevating developer onboarding with platform engineering, which is actually a great topic and a topic we did not cover in the initial lineup for the event. So I'm very happy they joined us. And Adriana and Anna, I'm moving the stage to you guys.
Thank you so much. Well, everyone, welcome to Onboarding Doesn't Have to Suck. We are super excited to be here today. Now, before we get started, allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Adriana Villela, and I have been doing computer things for 20 years, longer if you count me learning BASIC at age 10. Translation, I am old. I am a CNCF ambassador, a second-year HashiCorp ambassador, blogger, and podcaster. By day, I am a senior staff developer advocate in the observability space, and I actually spend a chunk of my time as a maintainer of the OpenTelemetry end user SIG. By night, I climb walls for fun, and I also love capybaras. I think they're my superpower because they make me happy.
And hey, y'all, my name's Margarita Medina. I have the pleasure of working alongside Adriana as ServiceNow Cloud Observability as a senior staff developer advocate. I'm also a CNCF ambassador. And when I'm not doing computer things, you can find me cooking lots of Latin food, watercoloring, or messing around with makeup looks. I'm part of the GC for CNCF's Captain Project. I contribute to the Kubernetes release team, also a member of the OpenTelemetry end user SIG, and I sit on the Code of Conduct Committee for Kubernetes. I've been in tech for just a little shy of 15 years and have been focusing on cloud infrastructure and reliability the last 7 years. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get this talk started.
Okay, we do have a pre-recorded video, but I just realized I think I need to share our sound on Zoom, which I did not do. So let me unshare and reshare the deck. Oopsie. Just give me one sec. Of course, these things happen like live, right? Share sound. Hurrah. Okay.
Yeah, I can see slides now because I wasn't seeing them before. And I was like, we had the right slide. This is perfect.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, here we
Sweet.
go.
Hello, Adriana. What's happening? Welcome to your new job.
Ooh, thank you so much, Anna. Happy to be here.
You should have received your new laptop by now. After I explain HR policies and procedures, you will go ahead and join Bob, Milton, and Peter in a Zoom call for tech onboarding over the next 2 days. There, you and your classmates will sit and install the company's blessed tools on your devices. It's mandatory attendance. If you can be there by 9 a.m., that would be great.
Wait, we're going to be installing things manually?
Yeah, of course. We have always done it this way. Do you have a problem with it?
Well, that'll take days, and I kind of have this really nice automation set up with Ansible to install all my tools.
Yeah, that's nice. But you can't do that here. Go ahead and keep that for your personal laptop. We have our allowed set of tools, and you can't deviate from that because we need to stick with corporate compliance rules.
Well, hopefully you like Office Space as much as Adriana and I do. But if this scenario is familiar to you at all, you're really not alone. The fact of the matter is that onboarding can be really challenging and stressful. After all, you're in a new job with new people and new policies and procedures. You have to deal with the new tech stack and tooling. And this often comes with a higher learning curve as you're trying to navigate this new environment. But couple that with the fact that many organizations don't have their act together and don't have a streamlined onboarding experience, and it can be a bumpy ride. This results in a very time-consuming onboarding experience. So one of the challenges when setting up many developer machines is software installation, of course. Many organizations provide new employees with machines that just have a base image. This contain a common set of software tools used by everyone at the company, regardless of what the role is. This software includes, but is not limited to this list, to things like a browser, something like Google Chrome, an email client, something like Outlook, our productivity tools like Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. We can't forget collaboration software like Slack or Teams, and video conferencing software like Zoom, and of course, security software like our VPN. That's a lot of software, but this means that developers must then install development tools on their own. And depending on what type of organization they work at, that installation experience can be very different. So let's take a look at which type of developer installations that can be.
So we have the Vault. Here, developers are allowed to install software only if it's from an approved list. It's usually managed by a security team, and approvals for software might take a really, really long time. Now, you might find this in organizations that maintain really high levels of security and compliance because they're dealing with extremely sensitive data. So that might include finance industry and healthcare industry.
Next up, we have Red Tape Tango, where developers are allowed to install software from an approved list, but they can go through a whitelisting process to add more software to this approved list. This might not be like the Vault, but due to processes and policies, approvals for software might actually take a little while. This can be common in organizations that need to maintain a high security and compliance standards, but they do have some wiggle room. This is something like a SaaS company or consulting companies.
And last but not least, we have the Wild Wild West. Here we have a free-for-all where developers can install whatever they want. Now, usually this lacks processes or guides on how to get started, and we see this often in small fledgling organizations where security isn't a concern, at least not yet. For example, in small startups. Now, all that said, what exactly goes into a developer environment? Now, the list below is by no means exhaustive, but it should give you a good idea of the types of tools that developers want or need. For example, language-specific software development kits or SDKs, such as the ones for Python, Go, and Java. After all, you need to compile or interpret your code, the ability to package it up. And also don't forget our integrated development environments or IDEs so that you can write your code along with any applicable plugins and the ability for developers to install some of their own favorite and hopefully approved plugins. Now, as developers, we also love us some command line. So having a terminal and a default shell is extremely important, along with the ability for developers to install and configure their favorite shell, because after all, we love our shell bling. And who can forget Git for version control management, along with various command line tool interfaces or CLIs, depending on what your team does. These may include things like good old kubectl or the CLI for your cloud provider used at your organization, for example, Google Cloud. We also have virtual environment tools like good old Docker and VirtualBox, and of course, other supporting tools required by your team, such as Postman and Homebrew. But wouldn't it be nice to have a one-click install for all of this stuff on day one? One can dream. And this is where platform engineering can help. But first, let us define a few terms. Now, while there are many different interpretations and definitions of platform engineering, our favorite interpretation, to which we will subject you today, defines platform engineering as the next step in the evolution of DevOps. So, let's start with the basics. DevOps gives us the fundamental principles of collaboration, codifying all the things, automating all the things, and rapid feedback loops, which we've come to know and love. Site reliability engineering, or SRE, then applies those lovely DevOps principles with a focus on customer impact and reliability. And finally, platform engineering is an extension of SRE. Now, while SRE is focused with external customers, platform engineering takes things a step further and also focuses on internal customers, i.e., the developer. Now, developer experience or DevX is one aspect of platform engineering that we're exploring today. But what is DevX? DevX is about how developers feel, think, and value what they do. But why does it matter?
We took a look around on the internet to try to find some research around this, and we came across the DevX in Action study, which is a study of its tangible impacts put together by Dr. Nicole Forkston and some others published on ACMQ. This reads that developers who find their tools and work processes intuitive and easy to use feel that they are 50% more innovative compared to those with opaque or hard to understand processes. Unintuitive tools and processes can be both a time sink and a source of frustration, in either case, a severe hindrance to individuals and teams' creativity. This means that DevX really matters and it does impact the developer productivity and satisfaction. Furthermore, this report highlights that there is a difference between simply writing code and writing code in an environment that is optimized for writing code. Environments that are optimized for writing code are efficient, effective, and conducive to well-being, and they rely on the right mix of tools, practices, processes, and social structures. So, what is it that you should keep in mind when building out an onboarding experience for your developers? Well, we want to keep in mind security or flexibility. We want to keep in mind dependency management and time to value. You want to ask yourself these questions to try to understand the type of onboarding experience that you want to bring to your developers. And guess what? Platform engineering is great because you don't have to choose one column over the other. They can all be just as important. So, how is it that you can get this done, you ask? Well, before we answer that question, we have to look at two types of developer environment setups. So on one hand, you can use a self-contained environment. That means the developer machine has base tooling only, and developer tools are accessed via containerized or virtualized environments. This is something that runs either locally or on the cloud, or a combination of both, something like a cloud-hosted dev container and a local IDE. Examples of these type of self-contained environments include GitHub Codespaces and Vagrant.
On the other hand, you can install all of the tools locally. We have developer tools installed and accessed on a local machine, basically the traditional setup. Now, this requires more local compute and storage compared to running a self-contained dev environment in the cloud, where your workstation is basically just a terminal. In this case, a configuration management tool like Ansible can be used to configure and install developer tools locally. Now, here are some of the tools out there that can help us with these kinds of setups listed in alphabetical order. So we have tools like Ansible, Backstage, DevPod, GitHub Codespaces, Radix, Port, and Vagrant. Now, this chart gives you a basic overview of the capabilities of each tool. And while some of these tools do the same thing, other tools can complement each other to help improve developer onboarding experience. So next, let us take a look at what two potential platform engineering onboarding flows may look like.
The first example that we're showing shows the onboarding flow for a self-contained developer environment. In this case, we're going to be talking about GitHub Codespaces. With GitHub Codespaces, the platform engineering team is going to be responsible for creating the codespace configurations, and these environments can easily be spun up as well as brought down. Since the whole environment is remote, you actually don't need to worry about having the right amount of processing power, storage space, and developer tooling running on your local machine. The trade-off here is that you will probably need to manage different code spaces for different repos or even different branches. Let's take a look at this flow. First, the developer arrives on onboarding day, ready to get started. Then, the developer goes ahead and kicks off the onboarding process by going to a designated wiki, which then takes them to a GitHub repo. From there, they're able to bootstrap a hosted environment running on the cloud hosted by GitHub. This environment contains all of the tools and configurations needed to start adding value to team as soon as day one. Once this environment is created, they're able to get to work and start on their first PR.
Now let's look at our second example, which is an example of a local install onboarding workflow. So remember that unlike the self-contained onboarding workflow, the developer does all the work on their own developer machine in this onboarding workflow. So making sure that you have a good amount of storage and compute power is absolutely essential. Now, it also means that you have all of the tools at your disposal all in the same place, so you don't need to rely on a network connection to actually access the tools. Now, here we're making use of a developer portal tool. And examples of developer portal tools include Backstage, which is an open source CNCF tool with an optional SaaS offering, and Port, which is a SaaS tool. Now, our developer portal tool example uses GitHub Actions to orchestrate the onboarding and Ansible to install and configure tooling onto the developer workstation. So let's consider this. In this flow, the developer will kick off onboarding process from a developer portal, and then the developer portal tool triggers a GitHub action. The GitHub action in turn kicks off an Ansible playbook. The Ansible playbook is responsible for installing and configuring tools on the developer machine, much in the same way that it would do so on some production server. And the playbook also sets up the appropriate permissions and access to various systems and services that the developer will need to access during their time on that team. Now, at this point, the developer might also want to install some additional tools that might not necessarily be part of the core team tool set, but are corporate sanctioned tools, so they can go back to the developer portal and follow a similar process where they go ahead and say, hey, I want to install these tools. It'll kick off that GitHub action, which will kick off Ansible, which will then install the tools on their machine. And note that instead of Ansible, you could use any other configuration management tool that tickles your fancy. And similarly, you could use any CI/CD tool in lieu of GitHub Actions. So there you have it. Now, before we wrap up, we wanted to leave you with some lovely tips for building a better onboarding experience for your developers. So first off, you need to balance the ease of installation of software with security and compliance constraints. Are you a Vault, Red Tape Tango, or Wild Wild West setup? And do you want to provide your developers with a self-contained or a local dev environment setup?
Then we have to remember that DevEx is never done. There's always going to be room for improvement. So check in with your newly hired developers to get feedback on their recent onboarding experience while it's still fresh in their mind. But similarly, check in with all developers a couple of times per year to get their talks on the developer experience in their teams. Then, don't work in isolation. DevEx is a team sport. You need 1. Feedback from InfoSec to ensure that you address security requirements, but you also need to work with developers to understand what types of tools they need and why. Then you want to talk to other platform engineers outside of your organization to see if you can pick up on any interesting tips, tricks, and best practices.
And finally, do not forget the humans. We are huge fans of the buddy system for onboarding, whereby we have one seasoned employee paired with a new hire. And so that seasoned employee is the go-to person as the new hire comes on board. Ensure that you create and foster relationships between your new hires and leadership, along with some teammates in other key departments. Now, remember, sometimes you might be onboarding with folks from different parts of the organization, and it's always good to make friends with them. Make friends in HR, make friends in security, because you never know when that will come in handy. And finally, have a place where new hires can talk to one another, where they can meet and ask questions and generally bond, even if it's through something like Slack or Teams. And as we wrap up, we would like to leave you with some lovely resources and shameless self-promotions. First off, if you're more of a reading fan, we do have a blog post version of this talk. If you're curious, I have created an Ansible playbook that I use myself whenever I get a new personal machine, and it installs all of my favorite dev tools. And it's been great, especially one time when I got a new MacBook for myself, and then 2 months later promptly spilled water all over the keyboard and had to basically get it refurbished and reinstall all the software. That thing saved my life. It is open source, so you can check it out if you want to play around with it. Also, we have a link to the article that Anna was mentioning from Dr. Nicole Forsgren and others about developer experience. And another example that you might want to see on setting up development environments, there's this great open source project called HashiCube, and it's all about having a HashiLab environment in a box. Now, they use Vagrant to basically provision a Docker image whereby it installs a bunch of Hashi tools all in this one Docker image. So it includes HashiCorp Vault, Console, Nomad, and a bunch of other tools. They even have as part of it an installation of Minikube, all in one Docker image. It's pretty wild. I've used it a bunch myself. Definitely a cool one to check out just to see what a complex setup like that looks like. And in terms of shameless self-promotions, I have a podcast that my daughter produces along with me called Geeking Out, and Anna was a guest on the podcast, and I've had other guests, including Kelsey Hightower and Charity Majors. And Anna and I, once upon a time, had a podcast together called On Call Me Maybe. It was awesome. It was 2 seasons. We were sad to let it go, but we've had some great guests, and it's still available on your various podcasting platforms, so you can still check it out.
And in case you were wondering, all these images in this deck were generated by AI because as much as we love tech and art, we can't draw, but we are great prompt engineers. So we want to say thank you to our evil AI overload, Bing AI, powered by DALL-E 3, for the creation of these images.
And with that, we thank you for attending our talk, and we sign off with peace, love, and code.
And we still have a question though. We have a question from Gandon. How do you call Ansible on your local machine for installing local tools from the remote GitHub action execution?
If I recall correctly, it would be similar to what you would have to do on a server, where I believe like you need to have SSH enabled. So the Ansible would have to be able to SSH into your local machine in order to do that remotely. Similar, just like you would have to do on like installing anything on a remote server. And because it would be on your like corporate network, that should hopefully not be an issue.
So I hope we answered this one. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Adriana. It was great. And we will
Thank you.
put you on the YouTube channel as well, and then people can access all the great resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.